G'day car enthusiasts, this is the new X3 M40i that the good people at BMW have given to me for the day, and I'm going to do a quick review on it comparative to what I normally drive, which is a 6 Series BMW. So doing a quick walk around, what really jumps out to me is I think the grille, let's talk about the grille in the X Series. The X5 is pretty big, the grille. The X7 is beyond comprehension. But I actually think the X3 grille is right on the money. I think they've got a good size. There's a good texture with a good color in there. You can see those diagonal struts inside. I'm not too keen on them, but that's becoming quite common, and it's always been there in BMW, but you can just see them more predominantly now as they stick out. Going further down here on the grille, you can see that is the radar cruise control. What I don't like about the BMW is these fake vents. Many cars are guilty of it, but why do it? However, this vent here does actually go through to the wheel arches, where you can get some air going through those wheel arches to reduce both noise and drag, they say, but of course keep those brakes a little bit cooler. Here we have more fake vents that are going nowhere. That makes me mad. I don't understand why they do it, but I really do like this brushed metal color. Now this car is absolutely filthy. This is how the good people at BMW gave it to me. So you're seeing a BMW in its, I guess, worst state. But as we go around to the rear, we can see it's actually quite tidy. I was looking at the X7 today, and the rear of the X7 is actually really tall, where the rear of this isn't too bad at all. When you look at the exhaust pipes down here, these are much better in the sense that the exhaust pipe is rectangular, as opposed to what we see quite often where they put a round exhaust pipe in a rectangular housing or tailpipe, and that's actually gone in there quite nicely with the dual exhaust. Now I might add, this thing just sounds absolutely wicked, which we'll get to in a minute. And there it is, the classic M40i badge. A very nice package indeed. And with the BMW, they're doing more of this three-dimensional brake light, this tail light that's coming out even further. Unfortunately, when it comes to how exciting it is out the back, there isn't much to it, but I don't like this camera here. Now admittedly, I come from a 6 Series where the whole badge flips forward. When you reverse, the badge comes in here, but this appears to move, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But when we go into the boot, we can see automatic tailgate, quite nice with these rails here, and these rails so you can clip in accessories, so you can do these tie down straps, and these are adjustable. You can slide them along like that, and it's just push and slide, and that's pretty Gucci. Of course, you have what's quite common up here, these 12-volt sockets. And going further in here, this is the cargo cover that you can put up top. Now this you take out, and I won't do this because I'm doing it with one hand in a car park, it's a bit awkward, but you can lift that out and clip it up to this point here, and then cover the cargo in the back. And when it comes to putting down the seats, pull on this lever here, and you can see that's not going all the way forward because I've got a bag on that back seat. And then pulling on this, that one did almost go all the way forward, but I've got another bag on that seat, and that's why they're not going all the way forward. This has the cream interior, which I'm not real crash hot on, but that's a personal thing. Neither here nor there. Going over to the child safety tie down points, quite a nice finish here, but the problem is with this material, whenever anything gets stuck in it, like a little bit of muck, it's sometimes quite hard to get out, and that's not unique to this car. That's quite consistent with all BMWs or any car that uses this material. So if this were my car, I'd pay for the optional and extra mat that you can put down. Little quirk and feature, you can see up in this little corner window, not only is there ventilation here, which I would imagine is a speaker in there. I can't actually be sure. Leave your comments below, is that a speaker or a vent? But at the same time, you can see there are the rear demisters in that little corner window there, which is a pretty cool quirk. Looking up at this one, you can see the big moonroof there, the big sunroof, and that goes all the way back to the back seats. Unfortunately though, it's not a solid roof, and it couldn't be a solid roof because there's not enough room for it to slide back in. but what is unfortunate about it is it's this soft material, as in the I call it stocking. It's just like a stocking that covers only part of the roof, as in when it rains and you've got a glass roof. So here's the thing with glass roofs, for your reference, is that when it rains or hails, if you don't have a thick cover underneath, it actually gets quite noisy. I haven't driven this in the rain, but just from experience of driving cars without a thick sunroof, what will actually happen is, of course, you'll get a lot of noise coming in here. Looking at it from over the top, I just want to show you this. Probably bad reflection, but there's a head-up display. Certainly not a new feature, but this one is quite wide. That is, when you drive, the head-up display inside is really wide, which gives you a lot of coverage of information in driving. Looking at the brakes, nice big blue calipers on this, and the size of the wheels, these are standard on the M Sports or the M Series. This is a 275 35 21-inch rims. For years, BMW struggled with wheel design, in my opinion, but I think they're really nailing it now. All right, let's get inside this thing. Into the back seat, where I've folded them back up, we have the armrest. Oh, that's a bit tight. That folds down here. Open up for your cup holders. That's a little bit clunky because they sit up high, but it's a thin armrest, so physics would dictate that you'd have to do this so the drinks didn't go everywhere in the back seat, especially if you've got kids here. Things could get nasty. Looking at the little control down here, it's not a dual climate control in the back, but it is a tri-climate control vehicle with controls in the back and dual climate control in the front. And you can see there, looking at the front, it's pretty standard across all BMW designs now, with a kind of diamond shape at the front, or you might call it like a hexagon size, with a shape with 6 sides in that center console. And I've always enjoyed the BMW steering wheels, but I just don't like this finish. Again, it's a personal thing. I don't like the finish of that steering wheel with that silver material and the kind of rounded buttons. These designs always come and go, but personally I just don't think that's too flash. Onto the rear doors. Besides those cup holders there, got really nice big bins here. This is quite standard across cars now, which is really handy. Have these big bins here for a water bottle, and you've got nets here. And I find that these little grooves here, when you sit in the back seat, just that little bit of groove here and here, it's almost like your knees slot in there beautifully, and every inch counts. I'm 6'3" and I struggle sitting in the back of this car, noting it is the X3, but I think for average sized people, sort of below, I don't know, 5'10", there wouldn't be too much trouble sitting in the back. But once you get over that 6 foot mark, yeah, it's not the most comfortable car to be in the back of, but many times we don't carry people in the back, and if we do, they're normally kids. Now into the interior of this car, going further into the dash, we'll start this thing up. Listen to this if you can hear it. Probably a little light to hear that, but this engine just sounds absolutely marvelous. It is a really sexy engine. Okay, so I've been driving Beamers for a while, as I'm assuming you have as well, and if you haven't, there's a few things I want to go over here right now. So here, when we change the modes, when we go from eco to comfort to sport, you see it's quite reflective down, quite shiny here, is this is better in this model because I can go directly from Eco Pro to Sport, whereas when you're driving the old adaptive drive, or changing the way that sports modes are, you have to, there's only a lever here, so you have to flick through. So say you're in Eco Pro, and I actually find this annoying in the old versions. If you're in Eco Pro and you want to go to Sports Plus, you can't just press a button and be in Sports Plus. You've got to click through all the modes, and this one's better in that, in the sense that I can go straight from, as an example, Sport down to Eco Pro. But what I don't like about it is that this is actually just one solid button. That is, they're not 3 separate buttons, but it doesn't seem to matter. Obviously there's some type of touchpad, because when I changed it here, it knows which part of the button I'm pressing, and it flicks through there and changes into different driving modes. And of course here on the dash, this is not new either. As I flick through, here we are in Eco Pro, nice blue, and makes us feel good about the environment. into comfort, very standard cluster, and then as we go into sport, you get the big tacho and a much more aggressive looking cluster there. And what is also interesting about the sports mode here is when I picked up the car this morning, he said press sport, and I pressed sport, and he said press it again, and you can see here there's actually configurable modes within sport. You've got your standard sport mode, your plus mode, and your individual mode, and that's where this is where you can configure your individual mode to say, you know, how do you want the steering? Well, I want the steering comfortable, but I want, well, in this instance, I want the steering sporty, but I might want the engine comfort. And that's where you can actually configure the car to be exactly how you want it. And the transmission is another one. This is, again, not new, but it's just different how they're configuring it, in the sense that you can go through all different modes and configure it into your own preference of driving. And this is pretty cool. I like this. I like how it's set up here. Noting that this is the X series, we have downhill assist, and we press that. That'll make sure that we don't go too fast going down a hill. Another standard thing is, of course, the auto handbrake. I've been driving Beamers for years, and I have never ever used that. But I've never lived in a big busy city with lots of hills. Maybe in different cities, particularly if maybe you had a manual, you'd use that. But I've just never used that feature. I've just never found the need to use it. One other thing with this I should mention is that this new mode here, if I can get it, is adaptive. Now the adaptive mode, so that's actually a fourth mode. So if you think you've got eco, comfort, sport, and within sport there's 3 levels of sport, and then you've got adaptive. And adaptive is basically catching on to what's happening around you, and as I understand it, the adaptive can also read your GPS to say, right, you're on a dead straight road for the next X kilometers, we're going down to Eco Pro. And then when you go into a windy mountain, the adaptive, working with your, not only your driving style, but also the GPS around you, can say, hey, this is going to get pretty crazy now, let's get into some aggressive driving modes. Going over to here, this is a charging pad, but the issue I have with charging pads, and this is nothing to do with BMW, just charging pads in general, is that most people have phone covers on. And if you've got a phone cover, generally, especially if you've got a credit card in the back of your phone, as you do with those little pockets, generally it doesn't do anything. So that is, it doesn't charge through your cover. So you put your phone in here and your phone is not charging because it's not going through that cover. But what they do have is, of course, is a USB input here, which also connects to music. So when you put USB in here, you can also play music through there. You've got another 12-volt socket here, and then these cup holders again. This car is filthy, as given to me by the good people at BMW. I'm not complaining. It's just, you're seeing this car pretty much at its worst. You can even see here on the steering wheel, it's just trashed. And it's a shame, because this is a beautiful car, and they've given me this beautiful $100,000 plus car just covered in crap. Here, going through some of the driving modes, it has adaptive cruise control, and this is a difference. So in the olden days, adaptive cruise control, you would set the distance by pressing a down button and an up button. But in this version, what you've actually got here is you've got a down button, and that will just actually cycle through. I can't do it right now because I'm not driving, so I can't actually... can I turn it on? No, I can't turn it on, but I can turn on this button, which is the steering. And I don't know if you can see this. You can see the head-up display flickering there, not real good through this lens, but basically this is not so much new in the car industry, but it's becoming more common. This is actually steering assist. It will keep you in your lane, and I was testing that today. It'll keep you in your lane. Of course, when you keep your car hands off the steering wheel for a while, the car will yell at you and say, no, put your hands back on the wheel. But I was getting a bit cheeky and just putting one hand on the wheel, just resting it there, and it was essentially saying that, hey, get your hands on the wheel. I'm getting a phone call, so I'll just accept this. Back to the center console. What is actually disappointing to me, first of all, I don't like this silver. I know it looks cool now because it's different to the black, but mark my words, I think in many years, actually in a few years, I think this silver will look really outdated. I don't think it looks good at all. I think it looks cheap. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels actually very good. But again, this is just completely subjective, in my opinion. I just don't dig the silver. But you're seeing it more and more in the Beamers over all series. And you can see it here on the steering wheel. They're putting it there as well, but the silver is coming back, and down to the controls on the door, same thing. Here we have the automatic boot release, mirrors, mirrors folding in, left and right mirrors, all 4 windows, and locking the back windows so kids don't annoy you with playing with it. But what is also disappointing to me is these buttons here are, in my opinion, part of the best, one of the best components of iDrive. That is, there's so many versions of iDrive, or generations, shall we say. When iDrive first came out, you only had this little jog shuttle, and it was really annoying people because it took so long to do anything in your car, because you had to go through every single menu to be able to do anything. Then they made these shortcuts, and these shortcuts made you, or enabled you, to be able to just press a button and go straight to a different area within the iDrive. Then they added these buttons, and these are the best buttons in any car in the world, I reckon, and this should be part of any car that's got an integrated iDrive system or something similar, because this enables you to program anything that your car does into these shortcuts. So for example, in my car, in my 6 Series, number 1 is oil, number 2 is call home, number 3 is music, number 4 is SMSs, number 5 is Bluetooth. So when I say music, 1 was the hard drive, as in these cars hold a hard drive where you can store music in it, and that's why we've got a CD drive. Typically you put a CD in these things, you can rip the music or download the music, and then it's on a hard drive. And then you can use any of these buttons to do other things, and when I'm doing long driving, I actually make button number 7 or 8 turn off the screen. So when I'm doing night driving and I want the screen off completely, this big screen here, there are different ways of doing it, but just as a shortcut, I just press number 8 and turn it off. But here they've taken away a button. I've often thought these were so good that they do an extra row. They do 16 buttons, and you might say, well, 16 buttons, how are you going to remember it all? Believe me, you do. With my 8 buttons, I remember them. I know which button I'm pressing, and if I don't use them, then you could just do the bottom row as radio stations if you listen to the radio. But essentially what they've done in BMW now is they've actually removed a button, and this last button here is going directly to the Connect drive, which is basically the BMW store. And so I'm disappointed that they took away button number 8. Overall, panning through the interior, you can see it's quite nice, very luxurious in here. The 3 Series is probably, or it's an X3, but let's face it, it's based on the 3 Series. It's a little bit small for me. I think the X5 would be perfect. X7 is getting a bit too big. But again, going back to this color of the leather, I'm not sure if the picture's really picking it up here, but this is a brand new car, and you can see that the leather's already dirty. That's the problem. And again, nothing against BMW. It's just the problem with getting cream-colored leather. I've seen people sit in cars with new jeans, like blue jeans, blue denim jeans, and they make the seat go blue. And this car has less than 10,000 Ks on it, and the leather looks atrocious. And you could say, well, I'll just clean it. Well, you don't really need to do that with black. Yes, black leather eventually gets dirty, but you know, not within a few thousand Ks where it's already trashed. So I think that's a real tragedy about this leather, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it. All right, before I take this thing for a drive, I want to show you something that is really cool that I wasn't expecting. So I'm going to put it in reverse so I can activate the surround view, and I'll just go forward a bit so it doesn't make so much noise. Now, there is an auto function in this, and you're probably familiar with this, where it remembers how you drove into an area and how you're going to drive out. But what is really cool, when I park this car, watch what happens to the camera angle when I get really close to something. So I'm going to go back, and you're going to see the camera angle is going to suddenly change. There you go. So you can see it pans from looking straight back to going to a bird's eye view. But now when I go to forward, the way it pans forward, look at that. That's just really cool. When it first happened, I was like, oh, that's a bit too much. I didn't know what was going on, but it's just seamless the way they stitch this all together. And if I drive forward, noting I'm not holding the camera, someone else is, as we get closer and closer and closer, you'll see the same thing again. I go close, 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 and just when I get really close, maybe, there you go, you can see it pans down to a bird's eye view. So that's pretty Gucci. Now go back, I'll just show you one more time because I think it's so cool. Keep going back, and as you get really close, and just before I do get really close, I must admit I found it more difficult to reverse this car than my big 6 Series, just because I know it's not my car, so you get used to these things, but there seems to be so much going on with these cameras that, I don't know, it just seemed a bit too much at first, but I'd have to drive the car for a lot longer to see if I really didn't enjoy reversing it too much. As I'm going back, just as I get really close, there you go, it just flicks to that bird's eye view. Very cool, great feature. Before we take this out on the road, check this out. Up in the roof lining, get the sun right. I really dig these SOS buttons. I feel like I'm in a jet fighter. You drop that down and there's another SOS button in there. I better not press it because probably cool. Well, let's just press it. Let's see what happens. So I'm pressing that. Oh, it's giving me a 3-second countdown before, and I'll cancel that. Oh, I cancelled it. So you get 3-second countdown to be able to, well, that was a good little experiment. So if your kids are mucking around and they say, what's this? They press that button. The emergency call countdown says in 3, 2, 1. You can cancel it, which I just did. But you can see here, it's even come up with where I am. So I'm at the Australian National University at the moment, and it's giving me the degrees and minutes and the bearing of where I am, basically a grid reference, so I could send this through to an emergency service, or I'm presuming that would be sent to someone in an emergency if I needed. But going back up to this, when I was talking about the sunroof before, if I look at this roof, which the camera's probably not, it's this soft material, as in it's just a stocking, and I really don't dig that, as I was talking about before. But if I bring this all the way back, you can see this thing just goes all the way. It's really huge, and as a result it puts a lot of light in the cabin. And when I picked this car up today, summer in Australia, the roof was open and this thing was an oven. But maybe it was good that I had white leather instead of black leather, because I didn't actually get burnt. Okay, let's get another emergency call section and take this thing for a drive. Okay, driving the X3 M40i. I'm really hoping you're going to be able to hear this thing, because the sound is just wonderful. In fact, I need to ask BMW when I take it back today if the sound is actually coming through the speakers. I don't think it is, but if you know what I mean, what they do, many modern cars now, is they make engine sound, fake engine sound, come out from the speakers. And this thing sounds so good, I'm wondering if they're doing that, because it just sounds great. And now, certainly part of it is not coming out of the speakers, in the sense that this is a 6-cylinder, and you can hear the pop and crackle when you've got it in Sport Plus mode, of which I'm putting it in now. When you're in the Sport Plus mode, you can really hear this thing just rip, and I'll punch it now. It's just so quick, it's so much power. And remember, I drive a 6 Series, which is more than a $200,000 car, and I've done work on that 6 Series, which is essentially the same engine as this, but a much lower center of gravity, and a more sporty car, and a more expensive car, a little bit older of course, but this thing is just absolutely wicked. What I do like about it, also comparative to driving my daily driver, which is the 6 Series, is the height. Now I keep comparing it to the 6 Series because I'm genuinely thinking about buying a car similar to this. So if you imagine I drive a very low performance sports car, which is the Grand Coupe. I've got 4 doors. I like a practical car because I carry the dog, carry the family, and I want everyone to be able to use the car instead of climbing over through 2-seaters. I've never liked 2-seaters or even 2 doors. But this car has great vision. I'm up high, I'm comfortable, I can see everything, I feel safe. But what I don't like is, again, maybe it's just because I'm so used to the A-pillar. The A-pillar here is really straight up and down. It is sloping back, but comparative to the 6 Series, where it's really sloping back, it just feels weird. However, let me take off again. Those gears changes are just, this thing is a weapon. And I'm not bored of it yet. I've been driving it for most of the day, and it is just absolutely fantastic. But going back to those A-pillars, the thing with these ones is that they seem so vertical that you can't help to feel that or forget that you're still driving a soccer mum's car. But you do forget you're driving a soccer mum's car as soon as you come around a corner and you put down that foot, and the gear changes are just seamless. So again, you saw how configurable this thing is and how many different modes you can put it in, and so you can tweak how you want to drive this. But essentially I've got this in the most aggressive mode at the moment, and the steering is not as nimble as a 6 series or obviously a 3 or a 5 series or even probably 7 series, because although yes, they talk about how good the X series are as in the handling, ultimately you cannot take away the laws of physics. And although these X cars are driving absolutely brilliantly and handling beyond comprehension, particularly with the X drive that is all-wheel drive, you can't beat physics. You can't beat physics, that being a low center of gravity car. And if you don't believe me, look at any performance car in the world, it is low to the ground, because the higher the center of gravity, the more body roll you're going to get, no matter what you do. You can improve it, and this car certainly has improved it, and BMW has improved it, and Mercedes has done the same with theirs, and Audi with theirs, and then you put in all-wheel steering and you get the center of gravity as low as possible. But no matter what you do, if you try and do those same things or apply those same methods to a low center of gravity car, you're going to get much better handling. Okay, I'm going to use this opportunity here. I'm going onto an entry ramp where the speed limit is quite high, quite clear. So we're going to do a 0 to 100 test here. I'm just going to go into 100 zone, put up the revs, and let's go. And now I'm going up a hill here. This thing is just a weapon, an absolute weapon. And I love it. Woo! So that was, okay, now I'm fighting the steering wheel because I'm trying to change lanes. I've got the auto, this is the thing with the auto steering assist, is that when you go to change a lane, if you don't have your indicator on, it'll actually keep you in your lane, because the car is saying, hey, you're drifting out of your lane, even though you're trying to get out of the lane. So you got to go, oh, I've got to put my indicator on. Now, I was not changing a lane properly there, because it was actually a Form 1 lane merging thing, so the computer got a little bit confused. Essentially, when you are dealing with autonomy and automatic driving, you can see some of the problems that they're having with developing completely driverless cars, because there are so many different factors on the road when it comes to what you want to be happening and what should be happening and what is actually the reality of the road around you. But that stuff aside, the paddles in this is very standard in the BMW. Remember, many paddles are attached to the steering wheel and many paddles are attached to the column. Some people prefer them attached to the column, others prefer attached to the steering wheel. For me, I prefer it on the steering wheel. Why? Because wherever I put my hands, the paddles are. The reason why other people like paddles on the column, particularly drifters much prefer the paddles on the column, because the steering wheel is spinning around and around and around. Sometimes you go to change gears and you go to go up and you're actually pressing the down, and vice versa. But when it's on the column, they're always left for down and up and right for up. So again, that's just a personal preference, but because the steering is so tight on this when you're in sports mode, my hands don't need to leave the wheel. Therefore I always know where the gear paddle is going to be, so to speak. Okay, so I'm coming around a roundabout, and this is this bit of body roll. So I'm driving on a road that I drive pretty much every day, and again, although this handles well, it's just got that little bit of body roll because it's an SUV. But what is good, I had to go down a big gutter, as in not a hard gutter, it was just a smooth gutter, but when I do it in my 6 Series, I've got to be extra careful and take my time, especially with the long wheelbase. Whereas this, it's an SUV, baby, so you just go down it. As I'm staying in sports mode here, the engine holds its revs, so the gearbox, the transmission of course is waiting for action, therefore it's automatically holding in a much higher rev. But if I switch down to Eco Pro, everything becomes a lot softer, the steering opens up a little bit, the transmission is making far less aggressive changes, and the car becomes quite sedate. And this is a great part of technology. In the olden days when you were buying a sports car, it was pretty much always in sports mode. So it was always, particularly the old M3s, when you're driving the old M3s, all they knew was go, go, go. So you couldn't really drive them, you know, like a normal person. They were just always ready for action and just wanted to go. But I'm in eco now, and if I trump it in eco, there's a delay, and it still picks up, but it's definitely, you can feel it's in eco. Now, if I change it to adaptive drive, which I'm in now, same thing, cruising along at about 60 in an 80 zone, and I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. Press trump, and still takes a while to pick up. That wasn't actually too impressive, but of course, when I'm in sports mode, it just goes straight in. Now, of course, you can also, with the BMWs, drive this manually through the stick with pushing it down here. And I've got to admit, sometimes I'm always driving with paddles, but I've got to admit, every now and then I just grab the stick and change the gear there. And if you keep the gear stick to the left, it'll always hold its gear until you push it too far. The sound of this thing is just absolutely fabulous. And with the brakes as well, also quite impressive. A lot of weight to stop comparative to other cars. Actually, this car is not too heavy when you look at the specs comparative to, as an example, a 7 or a 6 Series, because that's a big car with a lot of luxurious features that all end up weighing the car down one way or another. This car isn't too heavy, but it does have a fair bit of mass. But the other thing is, because it's got big wheels means a big footprint, big traction, and big traction means the ability to grab that road when you're jumping on those brakes. Now remember, this car is one step down from the X3 M series, and the X3 M series is about, as I understand it, about another $50,000 or $60,000 on top of this. So this is about 100 grand, and the X3 M series is even more, like 60 grand more, which is I think that's pretty much a whole 3 series on top of what you're already buying. So the X3 M is, the stats are, this is 0 to 104.8 seconds, where the X3 M is 0 to 100 in about 4 seconds flat. So you're basically getting an eighth of a second less than the 0 to 100. And to some people, that's really important. I'd really like to feel the brakes and handling of the X3 M. But as it stands, this thing is just an absolute beast, and I love it. So, would I buy this car? Well, probably not at the ticket price it is. 115 grand is a lot. Now, of course, Beamers are generally pretty expensive, but the reality is, if you buy a Beamer that's even 1 year old, you can knock tens of thousands of dollars off the price tag. However, noting that the speed and comfort of this car is just insane, and noting that the sound is also like that, and I'm actually feeling G's as I drive this thing, it does make you start to wonder if it's worth it, particularly as the warranties and service package on BMWs now are so good. They're actually worth looking at. That is, in the olden days, you couldn't really get a service package, so you buy this car and you had to spend all this money to service it and maintain it, and the warranties weren't that good, they didn't last that long. But noting other car companies are doing, you know, I think Hyundai is now doing up to 7-year warranties. 7 years. Now, I don't think I'd ever buy a Hyundai, but 7 years. Imagine buying a brand new car and knowing for 7 years you didn't have to pay anything. It's difficult to look over, particularly if you don't really care about the brand and the handling and the drive. That's why these smaller car companies are becoming bigger car companies, because the biggest car companies in the world, such as, I don't know, BMW, Ford, Mercedes, and so forth, they're not doing 7-year warranties. Whereas Hyundai and Kia, 5 years has been around for a while, and now they're pushing to 7 years. 7 years is big. But going back to this car, you can get service packages that basically you pay, I think it's about 2 grand or something when you first buy the car, and then you don't have to worry about servicing costs. You pay that once, and including spark plugs as you go through these cycles, and oil filters and cabin filters and all the filters and fluids, it's all included in that package. And that actually makes it quite a good deal, and quite predictable when you're looking at the expenses around around purchasing these cars and maintaining these cars. But all of that is washed away with the depreciation. These things just depreciate. All cars depreciate, but the luxury cars depreciate like there's no tomorrow. A $200,000 BMW is half price within a few years, and within a few more years, irrespective of the kilometres on it, and irrespective of how well it's been maintained, you're basically picking it up for a third of the price. So this car that I'm driving right now is nearly $120,000, but if I were to buy it in 3 years, I'd get it half price. I'm more than confident I could get this for $60,000 in 3 years. So that depreciation it's a really big factor. And it doesn't matter how good this thing handles and how good it sounds. 60 grand over 3 years, that's a lot of money. So I'm just trying to give you some crackling sound there. I'm here, as I just ride this little bit, you can hear the exhaust crackle as I go through. So I'm going to go around quite a tight corner here. And this is the body roll. Again, I'm very familiar with this corner. I take it twice a day. Yeah, so and remember, this is also all-wheel drive, so I'm putting power through all four wheels. It goes back to the physics I was saying before. I was getting a little bit of wheel squeal there, even with great tyres and brand new car. You just don't get the handling of a sedan. There you go, you can hear that wheel squeal, and that wasn't even that fast. Actually, that's probably sealed the deal in there. Sounds great, handles great, but just doesn't hold like a sedan. And if you don't need an SUV to go off-road, I think I've pretty much just answered my question. Would I buy this car? No. Would I buy it for my wife? Yes. Not for that price, but you know, like when you're married or you've got a partner and you sometimes need to borrow their car. If I had to borrow this car to get to work, I'd be very happy with that. And if I had to borrow it to move some furniture and do the soccer mum thing for the day, yes, I'd be very happy with that. For the daily driver, if I wasn't being an idiot, yeah, it's pretty comfortable. It's easy to get in and out of. The vision's good. It's got all the quirks and features that you need and the luxury comforts that you expect from any luxury car, especially a $120,000 car. But for something to love and cherish, I'm a little bit sad because no, that handling, as I just took that corner then, it's a corner I'm very familiar with. I wasn't taking it that quick, but the laws of physics were saying, no, we're not going to hold on that tight. We can't actually do this. And that is nothing against BMW. I love BMW. It is just the reality of SUVs comparative to sedans or sports cars. You just can't get that handling. Anyway, let me know your comments on this. Would you buy an SUV? Are you driving an SUV? And have you gone from a sedan to an SUV? And if you have, I really want to know, do you regret it or are you glad that you did? Thanks for listening, happy driving, and I'll talk to you next time. I can't be sure I'd actually buy it for over 100,000, but when it does that,